In today's episode of Wellbeing Wednesday, we are joined by Lois Cameron and Margot McKay, Talking Meds directors, who will talk us through a demonstration of their visual tool for having effective conversations in lockdown. This is a recording of a live webinar. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Alliance Live, the online information and learning portal showcasing examples of innovation and integrated working taking place across Scotland within health and social care. This is one of our Wellbeing Wednesday episodes, which showcase different ways to keep well during lockdown. I will now hand over to Lois and Margot, who will give us a bit of background on the tool before talking us through an exercise and then taking some questions.
Thank you. So that Talking Mats is really a tool for lots of different people. It doesn't matter where you get your communication difficulty for. It's a tool for really listening and having a better conversation. So it may be used with people with dementia, with children and young people, people with learning disabilities, people with neurological conditions. It's really not about where the communication disability comes from. It's about reducing the impact of that communication. Talking Mats was developed at the University of Stirling, and it is really a place to have a visual conversation, and that visual conversation really creates a listening space for people. And I think listening is often underrated. It's such a key skill, but it's often not given the attention that it deserves. And Talking Mats also is a way to support people who may have difficulties expressing themselves. It definitely helps decision making and helps capacity decisions and supports people to make those decisions. I've said it's about lessening the impact of communication disability, and it does have a strong evidence base in research. You can have Talking Mats conversations about lots of different things, but because it comes from research, it's important you understand the principle. So that's why training is key, because it might look simple, but it's not simplistic, and there are various things that you have to do when you do a Talking Mat and that you have to be mindful of. So that's why the training is so important. In any Talking Mats conversation, there is the listener, i.e. the person who's facilitating the mat, and the thinker, the person doing the mat. So you might hear Margot and I use those terms, the thinker and the listener, and that's because those are how we describe people when they're doing the mat. The mat itself has a topic, so this topic is what somebody likes to do outside. You have a top scale, so this top scale is quite a simple top scale of like, don't like, not sure, and then you give the cards one at a time, asking the person an open question, and they place the cards down. In a nutshell, that's what it is. Slightly more complicated than that, but let's just go with that for the moment, and you'll see it demonstrated in a minute. So you get a snapshot in time about what somebody is feeling. So you can see this person likes clubbing, for instance, but doesn't like more formal dancing. We are a research-based organisation, so it's very important for us that our resources are rooted in, have an evidence base behind them. So our health and wellbeing resource is one of our flagship resource and comes from the World Health Organization ICF framework that really unpicks what it is that makes up all our health and well-being. What are the factors that make up our health and well-being in our lives? So early on in lockdown, Margot and I were experimenting really with how we could support people to have remote conversations. and we chose to use the coping one from the WHO framework. So this is an existing set that we've got. Talking Mats wasn't really designed for remote conversations, but we've had a lot of success really combining the digital version with platforms such as Zoom or Teams. So I think it's much easier to show you rather than describe it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand it over to Margot, who's going to take over.
Okay, hi everybody. It's good to do this with you this afternoon. I recognise some of our licensed trainers on the participants list and also some others from our Talking Mats community, but it's really lovely to welcome you all to this demonstration. I just set this up prior to our session this afternoon, and somebody just asked the question there, what does ICF stand for? It stands for the International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health, and it's a way of coding and thinking about your health and all the different aspects of your life. So when Talking Mats was making up this health and well-being set, we looked at what the World Health Organization said made up different aspects of our lives. And that was the diagram that Lois showed you previously. So all of these domains are, we have images for all of these domains, so you can have conversations about lots of different topics. So this one comes from the topic of coping. And I'm doing this Talking Mat from my web browser, which I've got to that through the Talking Mats website. So I'm doing this online, and I'm going to do it with Lois. And one of the issues around Talking Mats is around control, and it is better if the person themselves can actually take control of the screen at this point before we actually start the mat. So Lois, would you like to take control of my screen? Do you want to ask permission to do that?
I am asking permission to take control. I've asked.
Okay, so I'm going to approve that. And that means that Lois, I will ask the question, but Lois will still be able to place the image where she would like to place it. So we're just going to start the mat. Lois, I'm just checking in with you really about how you're feeling today, and particularly how you feel you're coping with COVID-19 and the effects of lockdown. So let's just start our conversation. First of all, Lois, how are you feeling about doing sort of simple tasks? How is that going?
Well, I'm actually going to put it in the middle because I don't know, sometimes my brain just doesn't seem to be in gear and I forget things.
Okay.
And I don't think I would normally.
Okay. What about more complex tasks? How's that going?
Well, strangely, if I'm focused and I just think that's what I've got to do, I can do those pretty well.
Okay. Okay. And what about working on your own? How's that going?
Well, I'm going to put that in the middle. I can work on my own, but I do really miss colleagues.
Okay, that's nice to hear, Lois. Me too. What about working in a group? How do you feel that's going?
Well, we've got to work differently now, and sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it doesn't go quite so well. So that's going in the middle too.
And what about your energy levels? What are you feeling about your energy levels?
Actually, I'm feeling pretty good about my energy levels. I've just played tennis this morning, and it was better than when I last played tennis. So, and I'm sleeping well. So. And I'm doing quite a lot of things to keep my energy levels up, so I'm putting that there.
Okay, that's good. Now, just ask you one, or you can see there. That's the other ones that are on the mat there, and I'm not going to go through them all, But Lois, I'll just ask you how it's going with managing your time. How's it going with managing your time?
Well, you would think because you're at home all the time, you'd have lots of time to do everything, but I don't know where time goes, so I'm putting it there.
Okay. So you've told me quite a lot there, Lois, and we've got a blank here. Anything else that around of how you feel you're coping that we could add on to the mat?
Well, yeah, kind of thinking about how we're going to get out of this and how we're going to adapt and plan for the future.
Okay, so something around planning ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you feel things are going with planning ahead?
Well, I think that's pretty difficult at the moment because we just don't know when things are going to go. So I'm going to put it there.
Okay. So just what you've told me then is in terms of how you feel you're coping, managing time is tricky.
Yeah.
Just that sort of concept of time is just strange in lockdown. And sometimes you feel you just don't have the time to do everything you want to do. Planning ahead is difficult because none of us really kind of know when all of this is going to come to an end. The things that you've put in the middle are working on your own. Doing simple tasks, just sometimes you find that you just forget to do things that you would normally not forget.
I do write. If I write things down, it's not quite so bad. So I'm going to move it slightly up.
Okay. Okay, and moving that more into the middle, sort of that working in a group,
Yeah,
is challenging remotely. So simple tasks is there in between those two, and complex tasks are going well. Actually, you can focus really quite well, and also you've said your energy levels are going well.
Yeah.
Okay, are you happy with that, Lewis?
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of how to do the mat remotely. Obviously, Lois has asked to take control of the screen so that she can actually move the images, and that works really well. Just to say that we had a webinar ourselves with some of our Talking Mats community around using Talking Mats remotely, and some of them were giving us really good examples of how they've used the NHS systems and different platforms to do remote talking mats. So we do actually have a recording of that and some of the different techniques that people told us about, which we could share with you if you're interested in that. So just really to say that one of our practitioners were all agreeing that we have to really make a special effort during this time of lockdown to really listen and hear what people are saying. And we're also looking at trying to produce a COVID-19 set as a little review set that perhaps people could use. That's something that we're just talking about at the moment. But we just want to finish this presentation just with a couple of examples of just some stories that we've heard about. This was part of a project that I was involved in called Can Scotland Be Brave? And this is just an example of how a talking mat can really help a young person to decide what is important in their own life and make decisions going forward. So this was a young carer who was working with his occupational therapist, and they were using the What I Do in Support from the secondary set. And the occupational therapist told us that she found out a lot about his responsibilities at home. He was somebody that never really managed to kind of cope with that general question, so how are things going? But when she broke things down into sections, he really started to open up. And there was lots of stuff that actually he felt was going well. And he was coping with things. He did say that he was having difficulty coping with particularly his mother's health declining. He wasn't able to do some of the activities that he wanted to do, and this mat was shared with his carer champion, his young carer champion, to kind of help him through some of that difficult sort of transition period. So this was just a good example of how, rather than that sort of big question, how are things going, if you just break it down into different aspects of people's lives, you can get a lot more information. And then the next slide is, again, it was from the same project. It was another story which was from a school. As part of our Can Scotland Be Brave project, we went into 3 different settings, and it was very much at a sort of universal level. So we trained all of the staff, the teachers in Langley's Primary and Falkirk, to open up conversations with some of the young people in their class, to open up wellbeing conversations. And we had a really lots of lovely examples, but this mat kind of just illustrates a situation where a little girl in the class was very, very quiet and did not really interact very well with other children, and the teacher just thought it would be she would be a good person to do a talking mat with. And the teacher just said that, again, she just really opened up using her talking mat, and she learned lots about her life and what was going on in her life and the things that she was concerned about, which was particularly in the situation around asking for help and issues to do with her daily routine. But together they decided that she was going to bring her guitar into school and play a song to her teacher, because her teacher had no idea that actually she loved music and had guitar lessons out of school. And the teacher said that this was the perfect platform for her voice and the things that mattered to her. It helped establish a bond between us. It would have been a very useful tool at the beginning of the term in order to establish that connection early on. It often takes us a while to make that breakthrough with pupils who put up a barrier. So this would help to build trust earlier. And I guess it is that thing, isn't it, as Lois was saying earlier, about just really listening and having a tool to check in with people and really listen to where they're at, and deal with these issues as they arise. Back to you, Lois.
I think thinking about lockdown and what it's meant to us all, we do need to have platforms where we can talk about our experience. We've been dealing with the immediate physical threat of the virus, and now as we move to the next phase, we really need to have the tools that are going to support people's mental well-being, because I think the challenge and the pressures on people's mental health are going to be huge and significant too for many people who've got communication support needs, and many of those groups will still be shielding and still not be able to mix easily. So we need to think about tools that allow people to have effective conversations. And if you're not doing very much and you're in the same environment all the time, that can be challenging. And this just gives you a platform to have a conversation that is neutral and allows the person to feel that they're listened to. And the first time that Margot and I did it early on in lockdown, which was that coping one, we realized how helpful it was for us and how it steadied us. So we thought, oh, this could have a wider application. So yeah, Talking Mats was designed for people with communication support needs. It still has a huge role for people with communication support needs, but I think there are also times to use it just to have a conversation, because it frees you up. And we always say that what Talking Mats does is it allows you to see a person with a different lens, because you're having a holistic overview, but not in a way that's full of lots of questions. There's something in the framework that makes that a more equal power balance. And time again, we hear people say, I never knew that about so and so. Oh, that was new. And that can be people that really know somebody well. So looking with a different lens is important, but also quite often it's not actually huge things that need to change to make a big difference to people's lives. Margot's given you some examples. We could give you examples all day, but there was an example of a man with dementia, and he had really gone off his food, and it became clear through the talking mat that actually his sense of taste had really diminished. And so then his wife was able to increase the spice, and he was able to engage in eating again. Or another example is a man in a day centre who had a girlfriend at the day centre, but what it came out in the mat was they never met out with the day centre, and so he wanted to be able to move that relationship on, so that actually he could see her not just in his work, as he called it.
Lois,
so yes,
we have lots of questions, so I think perhaps we should start answering some of the questions.
Well, I'm just finishing and then we'll go to the questions.
Okay.
So I think the key things in terms of the what we're doing in terms of COVID is that we have reduced our digital talking mat to £25 plus VAT, so it's £30, so that people have more ready access to it. And we've also got a significant reduction on the online training. So, and we, as Margot said, we have produced resources too, and we're still looking at that. So I'm very happy to move to the questions now. We've got 15 minutes, well, we've got more than that, actually, 20 minutes left for questions. So the first question is, will you share the slides with the participants, please? Carmen, I think this gets put on YouTube, doesn't it?
Yes, so we'll make the recording available, so people will be able to reference the slides there. And we'll send a link to everyone who's signed up for the session.
Okay, Margot, do you want to give Jennifer an answer to where do the categories come from? E.g., how do you interpret coping and other concepts that mean different things in different contexts and cultures?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jennifer. I think the WHO, the ICF framework, it really, in terms of what questions we're asking under each of the categories, all the different aspects of that issue are kind of listed within the ICF. So we looking at the topic of coping, we then looked at the ICF to say, okay, what does the ICF say that we need to ask about under coping? And that's why we've made images out of simple tasks, complex tasks. These are all part of the codes that are used. So I guess really the answer to your question there is that because that's a kind of worldwide resource, I think you would just be very aware about what it might mean to people from the culture that you're from. I kept that very broad. When I asked Lois how does she feel about doing simple tasks, I didn't actually then explain what a simple task was. I just assumed that she would know what that meant. The same with complex tasks, but that could be difficult for some people, and for some people you might need to just give an example. So, how do you feel, Lois, about doing more complex tasks like doing the sort of forecasting, the budgeting and the forecasting for talking mats for over the next year? Maybe you might want to give an example of a more complex task. But all of the images are all relating back to the codes within the ICF.
And I think also, obviously, in design terms, that's a challenge to keep those culturally going across cultures. We have got a design framework that we thought about quite carefully at the beginning. And I'm not saying that we always get it right, because that's a challenging thing to get right, but there are some articles that we can send about our kind of design code, if that's of interest. The next question is, I'm a teacher, can you only access the Talking Mats resource if you pay? And the answer to that is, Talking Mats is a social enterprise. We have no core funding. So, you know, we exist through our resources, our training, and our consultancy. So we do need to charge for our resources. There are some resources on our website that we make free, but, you know, we've got 9 people's salaries to pay. So, and we're not making a profit out of it. So yes, there is a charge for the resources, otherwise we wouldn't be here, basically. Are there mats for older people, so those with cognitive issues? Or yeah, the health and well-being is commonly used with people with cognitive issues and speech difficulties. On the original design, we had people with dementia, people with learning disabilities advising us on the images. And we get very good feedback on that. We can certainly provide links to the digital resources. I think we've answered about printing them or buying them. I'm going to hand all the hard questions over to Margot here. Margot, what do you think makes the conversation neutral? Is there a theoretical basis to what changes the communication?
Neutrality is a really important part of the whole Talking Mats technique. I think we very much that's part of what we do in our training. We talk quite a lot about what it means to be and hold that neutral space. In terms of being a listener, it's really making sure that you're matching your level of communication to suit your thinker. I think too many conversations happen where the power imbalance is such that perhaps the words that are used means that the person doesn't really completely understand what it is that they're being asked. And Talking Mats is a great leveler in that. It really helps to simplify language and simplify words to keep the mats as neutral and as safe as possible. I think in terms of a theoretical basis to what changes the communication, there's a lot of things that have been written around conversations with and without Talking Mats, and that is really kind of where this whole thing started from. Prior to becoming a social enterprise in 2011, there have been lots of research papers done at Stirling University looking at the effectiveness of conversations with and without a talking mat. And those of you who are licensed trainers, we tend to, I mean, you know that the key text that we tend to refer people to in terms of just the effectiveness of using the tool. I hope that answers your question, Jennifer.
I think the other thing I'd add is that is one of the things that we focus on training and get people to reflect on the neutrality of their conversation, because it's very easy for us all to bring bias into our conversation. So Catherine's asked about using, can you include photos as well as typing onto blank cards? On the digital version that's available on the iPad and some Androids, yes, you can include your own photos. It's designed for that. The web browser version, unfortunately, doesn't do that. You know, all things technical become obsolete or challenged, what's the word, after a while. So we are having to look at this very issue at the moment. And when we designed the digital talking mat in 2012, which was really highly innovative at that time, we didn't think about remote working because it wasn't on any of our agendas. So we will be thinking about that in the new design for the talking, for the new digital. Question from Claire about whether there's a refresher on the digital talking mats. No, we don't have a refresher, but what we do have had since lockdown is some Zoom calls where we've explored this issue and been learning together. So we've had two calls. One was just last week, and we're putting the sort of learning from that together. So if you email in, then we could put you on the list for the next Zoom call, which will probably now end of August. Margot, do you want to take the different font, picture size and different contrasts for people living with sight loss?
Yes, in terms of actually the doing it on the screen, that is obviously a little bit more challenging. I think you're very much kind of relying on the size of the device in terms of the picture size and the font. We are looking in our next development to try and have a way where we can actually increase the font and the picture size, because this has come up a couple of times, Lindsay, so thanks for that comment. We are trying to look at that for our next development.
And then Anne's asking about the touch screen. Yeah, on Microsoft Teams you can share. So I was using it with a mouse, which isn't as good as a touch screen. So touch screen would be even better, but we haven't actually tried that, have we, Margot? Because we've not had that. We haven't had touch screens.
No, we haven't. That was just with a click and drag, actually, Anne. But I think we had some, as I said earlier, we have actually had some really good ideas from some of our practitioners. You've mentioned a split screen. And some people were talking about using two devices so that they could still see the person's face, and also they could see them doing the mat. We've tried to capture some of that information from our call last week with all our practitioners, so we will try and type that up and send it round to anybody who wants to see.
I think we'll probably be turning it into a blog, because there's been so many queries about it. So if you keep an eye on the website, there'll be some link to it on the website. And we do try and keep, the website is really the place that you need to go to keep up with those kind of things, because we do try and put a new blog up at least once a week. So we've had quite a lot going up through lockdown, and we are trying to keep that up. Oh, Margot, I think that's one for you at the end. What was the card set that you used for the young carer? That's from Lee.
Oh, hi Lee. That was the one from our secondary pack, Consulting Children and Young Person pack. And those ones, Lee, you probably know, are based on the GIRFEC model. So we've got 3 different sets: My Body and Skills, What I Do in Support, and My Wider World. So that is a holistic set that really looks at the whole of somebody's life. And that set is actually based on the children and youth version of the International Classification of Functioning Disabilities in Health. So we've used kind of the GIRFEC framework, but we've also used the World Health Organization resource as well to kind of make that resource. And yeah, it's a good set, and it covers all of the areas that are relevant in terms of the so that set was for age 13 to 18. So it covers the sort of pertinent issues related to age and stage of development that you would be kind of going through in your teens. So it's a good set.
Okay, we just seem to have a very nice comment from Jennifer Bradley. Thank you, thanking us for our presentation, which was interesting and inspiring. So that's nice. And Anne Lafferty's off to trial this via Microsoft Teams. And if there's any issues, we do have guidance on sorting out things like the flash before you go in. So come back to us if you need any more specific guidance on that, because we had to kind of learn how to do that just at the start of lockdown. Carmen, have we covered all the questions, or have we missed any?
You have indeed. You've covered all the questions, and you've done a fantastic job of self-moderating. You made my job a lot easier. Can I ask one additional question of my own? See, when you're doing the talking mats remotely, would you recommend also having the video sharing on so that people can see who they're doing it with, or would you just do it?
I think this is one of the aspects of communication that I think has been really challenging for us all, is that we've had to speak to people through a screen. And you know, when we do our training in talking mats, we talk a lot about the non-verbal communication as well as the spoken communication. So I mean, I obviously did it there with Lois, and I was doing it without seeing any of her non-verbals. I think ideally, if I could see her face, then I can gauge her response when she sees the image for the first time, how long she takes to consider where she might want to put it. You can gain so much information from the non-verbal communication that if it is possible to see the person's face, then it would be better, I think. Lois, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt that that's quite a big loss, because so much information comes non-verbally. And that was one of the really creative things that came from our own Talking Mats community. I think Margot mentioned it earlier, where somebody used 2 logins. So one was the Zoom to share the Talking Mats, and the other was a log on so that you could actually see the non-verbals going on. The person who set that up has very helpfully given us a kind of bullet point, simple way to do it. Because the other thing is, we're all having to get much more technologically competent than we might have been beforehand. Does that answer your question, Carmen?
Yes, it does. And there were a couple extra questions that popped up in the meantime. Rachel was asking if you could please provide links to the guidance.
Yeah, we
maybe
can.
I can include that in the follow-up email.
We couldn't do that with the first blog, and then there'll be a second blog which isn't ready yet, but we could maybe send that as a follow-up when it's ready, if that's possible. Carmen, is it?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And then someone else was saying, so they see that there's an early years primary and health and well-being bundle, but which would you recommend purchasing if working with a range of children in primary school?
I think I would, with a range of children in primary school, I think I'd go for the primary young people set. Margot, is that where you would go?
Yes, I think the early years one is very much, it's 3 to 6, 3 to 7. The primary one is really from sort of 7 to 12, and then the secondary one is 13 to 18. So I think that middle sort of primary set is very useful.
And I would definitely think about looking at the COVID training, online training offer. That our online foundation course wasn't just designed at COVID, it's been running for a number of years. So it takes, we say 10 to 12 hours over 6 weeks, and you work through it. But at the moment, it's got a 30% reduction on it. And if you buy that with a resource, and you're getting your 30% reduction on the resource as well. So that way you get the training and the resource. So that's what I would recommend you do, because we know people get a lot from the training. We get that feedback all the time.
Yeah, we've had actually a couple of school groups that have gone through as a whole staff group. One of our licensed trainers is a head teacher in Glasgow. She's taken all of her staff through, and she's now she's moved on to a different school. So yeah, it's definitely worth getting the training if you're going to be using the resource.
And we do really try to keep up on lots of nice comments. Thank you very much. We do really try to keep up with our blogs and our social media and so on. So if you want to find out and social media is your thing, then give us a follow, and either on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram.
Okay, great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. If there are any other questions, please do type them up and we'll make sure that we answer them in the follow-up email.
Sorry, Carmen. Mary Elmers is just asking what's our website. It's very easy. It's just www.talkingmats.com.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. So if that's okay with you, Lois and Margaret, that brings us to the end of the webinar.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you both for delivering the fantastic presentation and answering everyone's questions. We at the Alliance hope it has provided some insight and takeaways for everyone to bring to their own work and organization. So before we go, we would just like to draw your attention to our contact details for Alliance Live. If you want to hold your own Alliance Live activity, you can reach us at live@alliance-scotland.org.uk. I'll send this in the follow-up email. So a big thank you to everyone once again who registered for this webinar, and make sure to check our YouTube channel and other relevant content on our Twitter channel. And thank you very much, everyone, and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.